us, as you know, our model is essentially focused on debt financing, and we work through field partners. So the assessment is primarily done on the field partner, who could be anyone, could be a microfinance institution, vocational training provider, artisans cooperative. So the first thing that we see is the processes that have been built so far, however small it is, right? Even if they are working in a couple of districts with a small number of in families, are the processes there in place? Do they have some kind of structure in place where there is a clear understanding of how their relationship is with their end beneficiary, either the customer or the entrepreneur? The second one is the partner's skin in the game with the end beneficiary, the entrepreneur. Essentially, what I mean is, the success of the success or the failure of the entrepreneur directly has an impact on the success or the failure of the entrepreneur, because you don't want somebody to come in. I can give you an example. Let's say solar lights, for example. We don't directly work with product companies who just want to come and give the lights. You do the financing, and they just take the money up front. They leave. I mean, there is no buy-in. There is no skin in the game for the companies. So we see a clear skin in the game requirement. The third one is everything else is figured out. Financing is the key problem. So there in India, I always say this, there are two main challenges. One is distribution/market linkages. The second one is financing. One is how do you take the products to the market. The second one is how do you make it affordable. So we strongly work only with companies which has figured out the first one. Like, let's say an artisans group, they know where to get the raw materials from, they know how to train them, they have a market linkage. What is missing in the piece is that working capital that can, pull the entire machinery together. And fourth one is, can this become part of the mainstream banking system? We are not looking at ourselves being the sole funder all our lives. We want these guys, and we are a very small part when you look at the requirement. The whole idea is, can we show some proof of concept to make it more interesting to somebody like a mainstream banker or a social fund, who can then pump in more money and take it from. So we take it from, let's say, 100 to 500, and then this banker comes in and takes it from 500 to 20,000 or 25,000, and there have been examples around that. So these are the four things we look at when we assess a field partner.
We believe in our field partners, the organization that we work with. We look them as an entrepreneur or an enterprise, because their vision. Just to share an example, I again like to take, since Vanashri Rural Development Center Baligar is here. His idea was how he can scale up the whole livelihood activity around goatry and dairy. So it is not like any other institution. Hey, he has 1,000 groups, or 500 groups. Each one will be given 20,000. Let them do what they think, and I will ensure that they get. That's not the point. The point is what can be scalable, how they can provide supports so that the whole initiative is successful. So that is the kind of entrepreneurship capability that we are looking at, because our goal is also for organizations like this to be sustainable, not to depend on charity. That's been our goal also. So we are looking at who are looking at their enterprise to be sustainable, and also take it to the people. And some of the other initiatives, we don't just focus on debt. We constantly strive to make it at this bottom of the pyramid, how equity kind of financing can be done. We have done some experimentation in the dairy cooperative model, in the water model. It's still in the experimentation stage, but we would like to, we feel there is a stronger need in this sector.
I think the themes that the group here has already articulated does cover the gamut in terms of what, both for that matter, in the non-profit space and the for-profit space, the themes are virtually identical. The other, if you want to say, a factor that comes into play when you're talking to either nonprofits that are starting, they want some grant money, or for that matter, a startup business, and that's clarity of mission and clarity of purpose, and their focus in the business. Too often you'll see somebody with a general idea of something they want to accomplish, but or they may have 3 or 4 different ways of getting there. But somebody who has, as what Vidya said, the passion for that idea, and what Will said in terms of the talent of the team, that's far more likely to be successful over time. So that'd be one area that I would add.
Now, self-help group federations took the responsibility of taking up this idea forward. Okay. So then, from first year, we had 128 farmers. Among the poorest, the farmers who are not the landowners, the leaseholders, who are having, I don't know how many, 10 decimals of land, not even an acre. So those kind of farmers were actually practicing SRA. So once they saw success, the village organization took the responsibility of replicating the same thing in other villages, taking these best practitioners. And they actually turned the entire Indian agriculture extension system on its head. The extension system works with only progressive farmers and the farmers who have capacity to, tenacity to take up this kind of risk. So once this was taken up, the moment we hit 50,000 farmers, then government of Bihar said, come on, in our agriculture strategy, we will have SRA as a core principle and ask the project to do it. Then we said, no, we are not an agriculture department. Our project is only working the poor for the poor, and agriculture department, then we support vegetable agriculture department to create an enabling environment. So as a result, what happens, you make a small investment which is risky, try to influence the policy and create an enabling policy that the poor are able to reap the benefit of that kind of policy. So that is a trajectory I think SRA we can try to.
As investors, let's assume that you know everything you know about microfinance now. The question I always get asked is, as you scale, and more money gets pumped into your organization, how do you keep your social values? How do you keep? Yeah, and so the question is, if you were the first entrepreneur of a microfinance organization before it got big, what would you do, knowing what you do now, to make sure that those social values were still embedded in that organization to prevent?
But let me just talk about the general case of investing in a social impact for-profit organization. And the question is, how do we determine that that organization will maintain its true north, which is to have impact, while it scales? And we've asked ourselves this question many times. And we've read literature, we've talked to people, and the best answer that we've come up with so far is we look at you. And we interview you, and we talk to you, and we get to know you, and we figure out what is your true north. What is you, the passionate leader who wants to build this business? Why are you doing it? Are you committed for the long term? Are you going to stop at nothing to achieve your impact? Or are you in it for the quick buck? Are you doing this because it came out of a experiment and you think you're going to do something else in 3 years from now?
I'm not sure if I'm the best person, but I would just completely agree with Will on this. You could do structures and you could make it complex and create holding companies, but at the end of the day, I think if we assess the entrepreneur right and continue to monitor the things that remain important, I think you have a pretty good shot at keeping to the true north.
I think the question about impact, I think it boils down to the entrepreneur, and the way I see it is a bit differently. Sadly and ironically, currently in India and perhaps worldwide, there's a lot more capital, there are a lot more investors chasing a handful of entrepreneurs. So the entrepreneur, it's entrepreneur's responsibility to find the right investor. So you need to really find the right investor who believes in your mission and not really looking at the term sheet, and sort of, the things which he should not be looking at, or he or she should not be looking at. So I think the entrepreneur has got an enormous amount of choice. So the entrepreneur needs to take that call.
The north for us in the Deshpande Foundation is very simple. That the work you were doing 1 year back, if suddenly there is demand for that work or not. If what you were doing is said will break even in whatever terms in terms of finance, is it not? Are the client you were reaching, or is it growing by 10%, 15% or not? And finally, there is this larger goodwill, there is, hopefully it's not harming environment and so on and so forth. It isn't that difficult. What I find as a foundation, us, that it's this lot of enthusiasm in starting something, and then idea is great and principles are in place, it's the execution that falters. the numbers, no, it didn't happen, this happened. A lot of these X, Y, Z externalities come. So it isn't really the, I think people are in this sector really good at keeping north, but execution and keeping that kind of, what do you say, commitment, rigorousness to keep on doing what they were doing more efficiently. So, sure, Anoj.
Entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs today are a lot more aware of the challenges of scaling a company than the microfinance guys who were building it, right? So today the whole fact that you as an entrepreneur and I as an entrepreneur have this constant tension going on as to how do we keep up the social ethos of the company while at the same time scale. I don't think that was a question that was in the minds of them, because that never happened first, right? So the whole fact that there are no real answers to the question, but the fact is there's some kind of tension, and as an entrepreneur whose values are in the impact first, at least you are making an effort, to balance it out. Whether you would be able to succeed or not is a second question, but at least you will be making an effort that the predecessors weren't making.
We look at a combination of qualitative and quantitative metrics when it comes to looking at impact. On the output level, I think all of us really have a good idea of numbers and and not only the number of beneficiaries and the costs and so on and what's actually happening, but also on the slightly more sort of intangible level in terms of what's happening in the community, what kinds of impact is it having on the women, children, depending on the program. So there's a combination of things that we look at. Basically, two organizational aspects that we as partners commit to improve. So this could be, say, for example, one organization may be wanting to scale but cannot do it with higher governance standards. So we work together on establishing very clear metrics that we will look at to assess whether the new governance level has been achieved or not simply just adding board members and new processes, but also the way, the attitude to governance. Or for somebody else, it could be that their impact, their data gathering systems are poor or not as strong as they need to be. So then we looked how to provide easier methods for them to collect, analyze, and then put out data that enables them to improve the work. So it's a combination. It's not just what the program is directly doing, it's what the organization has done over the period of grant to scale up as an organization.